The Hardball debate tonight: should Washington step in and regulate SUVs, or should it let Detroit build what it wants and what people want to buy? On America's highways, traffic fatalities are at their highest level. I didn't know this. In 12 years, the figures are being pushed upward by a number of factors, including an increase in what are called rollovers of trucks and sport utility vehicles. The car turns over. According to the Department of Transportation, fatalities and rollover crashes involving sport utility vehicles and pickup trucks accounted for half the increase in traffic deaths from 2001 to 2002. So the recent accidents, half of them are caused by these vehicles. But should we blame the SUVs or the people driving them? Joining us right now is DeFore with the Sport Utility Vehicle Owners of America, and we're going to be joined later by Dave Piddle from the Consumers Union. DeFore, son of Don DeFore, the former neighbor of Ozzie Nelson and Harriet Nelson. Your dad, I watched him for years. Let's go with this issue here. These cars, are they safe, SUVs, and why do they turn over so much if they are?
Well, when you look at the largest of the SUVs, which are the ones that are...
Expedition?
Expedition, Navigator, the ones that are getting the most criticism.
The bread trucks, I call them.
They have the lowest fatality rate, and that's why this attack against SUVs is absolutely wrong. But why are half the new accidents caused by SUVs? Well, first of all, the data that was released is half-baked. It's not wrong. It's half-baked in that only partially of the story is told. And why is that? Is because we were told how many extra fatalities there were in SUV rollovers. What we weren't told is how many extra SUVs entered the highways. There were 4 million extra SUVs just last year that enters. So if you
What's more likely to turn over when you're driving fast, an SUV or a regular sedan? What's more likely based on the stats we just mentioned?
It depends on the model, and what's more important is that the
smallest... How about we throw together all the SUVs and throw together all the sedans, regular four-door cars? What's more likely to go over? Turn over.
An SUV has a higher propensity to roll over, but rollovers are very rare events. What you want to look at is the overall fatality rate. And what you want to look at are other crash modes like frontal and side impacts, where an SUV is 2 to 3 times safer. So if you're going to ask yourself which car do you want to be in, it's the large SUV.
Let me try to dig a kernel of truth out of you. I want a confession. Skinnier, smaller SUVs that aren't as heavy as the big bread trucks, I call them, the Expeditions, do they turn over more frequently than regular cars?
Some of them are going to have a higher propensity to roll over. That's
because
true.
Look at the design. Because they're more top-heavy, or
yes,
what?
It's a higher center of gravity, and people need to understand.
Well, why don't we all go to this? I'm not a supporter of foreign cars necessarily, though I own a couple. But why don't we go to this? It's just too boring to say this, maybe. But why don't we go to Volvos? I know that's a very boring concept to most Americans. Buying a Volvo is like. So it's like marrying your sister. Okay,
I don't think that most Americans are going to want to be told by Big Brother what vehicle that they can buy, and that's the center of our purpose in existence. Is that
why don't we go to these safer Scandinavian vehicles, these Volvos? What's wrong with the regular? Shouldn't the government, just for a point of argument, shouldn't the government say build your cars as safely as the Volvo?
Well, in fact, all of the cars that are being sold are meeting all of the government safety standards.
They're turning over.
But they do. But no, Chris,
I want you to step back. Why do we have more traffic accidents now in America than we had 12 years ago? Why don't we make progress here?
A lot more cars were on the road last year. There was a dramatic increase in drunk driving fatalities. If there's an epidemic here, why wasn't the focus on the 17,000? They don't necessarily prefer SUVs.
Half the new traffic accidents are caused by SUVs.
No, that's the increase that they're talking about, the 700 or so where we had an increase in SUV rollover fatalities. We still have 17,000 deaths occurring from people that are drinking and driving. That far outweighs the importance.
I'm going to revert to my role as referee and leave the fighting now to David Piddle of the Consumers Union, Consumer Reports. David, make the case. Why should we regulate SUVs?
Well, I think consumers need information about how SUVs perform, and the government is developing tests so that consumers can make informed choices about the more rollover-prone vehicles, which there are some of. And when they try to make a choice for the safety of their family, they need to know how these vehicles will perform in emergency situations. The government is developing these tests. They'll make that information available to consumers later this year. And consumers will, for the first time, be able to make an informed choice, and manufacturers who want to sell those cars to those consumers will start developing safer vehicles.
Mr. Piddle, let's try to cut to the chase. Based upon what you know right now, are the lighter SUVs more dangerous than the average sedan?
Well, the SUVs, when it comes to emergency maneuvers, have a tendency as a class to roll over more frequently than sedans, and that's just the basic statistics that NHTSA puts out. And
out of 100 SUVs on the market, of every SUV size, all the way up to the bread truck, the Expedition, down to the small, sleeker model, how many out of 100 will roll over in its useful lifetime?
Well, the numbers are rather they're infrequent when it comes to real life, except that the frequency, although it is lower, they're much more serious, much more deadly, and they account for a very significant number of the deaths.
Why do people less frequently, to use a frequency term, use their seatbelts or drink more often when driving SUVs? What's that consumer use problem?
I don't consider that a consumer use problem the way you've stated it, because seatbelt use with sedans, SUVs, minivans is roughly the same.
No, that's wrong.
There's no question. Those are the numbers that NHTSA put out just recently. The important thing to recognize is all of us in society, whether it's the government or the car industry or manufacturers, have to push consumers to use those seatbelts. There shouldn't be any question about that. That's a societal issue. And nobody wants to defend alcoholic behavior behind the wheel. We need to have every element of society pushing to keep people who've been drinking out from behind the wheel. The question is, what do manufacturers do to make their vehicles safer performing?
Mr. Pittle, you're making the point that there's no higher incidence of drinking while driving or not using safety belts while driving an SUV. You say, sir, Mr. DeFore, there is a difference.
Absolutely. If you look at what the government put out last week, it showed that 80% of those people that died in the SUV rollovers were not buckled up, and they said that 75% of them could be living today if they had worn their belt.
And the question is, in what condition would they be living? There's no question that people should be wearing seat belts. Why don't we get past that and get on to the real issue? The real issue is whether or not manufacturers are going to elevate the dimension of safety in the design of their products. They should. There's a lot of things they could do to make these vehicles not roll over in the first place. That's the issue.
Like what? What could you do, or would it be, let me say, in terms of price, how would adding a safety feature or a safety structure to the SUV add to the price?
Well, it depends. I mean, right now you can buy an optional electronic stability control system for your car that can run anywhere from $600 to $800. But if that becomes standard equipment in SUVs, just the sheer economy of scale will bring that price down. And that's an important element for an SUV, because these vehicles do have higher centers of gravity, and just by that factor alone...
What does that mechanism do, sir? Mr. Pittle, what does it do?
It's a computer-operated system that when it senses that you're starting to go on a sideways slide, it helps the driver keep the vehicle under control. So it alternately controls the braking of each of the four wheels and keeps the vehicle more on track.
Why do you think people like SUVs? Because we're talking big money here. I mean, every time I go to a parking lot, it seems like they're all lined up.
Well, I think there's a certain appeal to them. First of all, the advertising makes them look like you'll be the most popular guy in town if you have one, and you go to places nobody's ever been before.
Well, I don't know. What about the ad that shows them all as a bunch of boxes, cardboard boxes, the look-alike boxes, banging into trash cans? I've seen the ads that make fun of them.
Well, yes, but, you know, I've talked to people who like to sit up higher in the car and be able to look out over the road. They have a sense of security and a better feeling about it. I really can't quarrel with their good feeling about that. People should be able to choose the styling and and select the car and the appeal that they want. The question is the manufacturer providing them the best, safest vehicle they can get for the money? And the fact is, they can do more things than they're doing now.
Mr. DeFore, let me ask you about that consumer. We're talking about freedom in a free society here. If you offered to people an extra, whatever it is, $600 to $800 worth of protection in this mechanism, would they buy it? Would they buy a car with that feature?
I think people will buy it, and there are a lot of consumers that are going for these new technologies which reduce your risk of rollover. We're all for that. We just don't want any regulation that's going to take some of the utility and usefulness away from the sport utility vehicle that millions of Americans want.
Like what?
Like the ability to carry bulky items from Home Depot, the ability to carry a soccer team, the ability to tow a boat.
And how would that be compromised by safety features?
If you wind up having to downsize, for example, which is what the federal government is also considering in fuel economy.
No, let's stick to safety. You said the larger ones are safer. So why would the government encourage use of purchase of smaller SUVs?
By federal fuel economy standards that they're already increasing.
We're changing topics. Let's stay right on this safety question.
Can I get into this?
Sir,
yes,
Mr. Pittle, go ahead.
Yes. What people don't realize is that when you put more people into an SUV, you're raising the center of gravity. You're making it less stable than if you put more people into a sedan. It has just the opposite effect. When you put more people in a sedan, the center of gravity goes down. It's more stable. In an SUV, it goes up.
You mean the soccer team gets more dangerous?
The soccer team and an SUV is more dangerous. They're far better off in a minivan. They're far better off in something that doesn't continue to increase the center of gravity as more people get in it.
Look, there's some areas we're in total agreement with.
You agree with that? That soccer team should ride in minivans?
We agree that the American public needs to be better informed about all different kinds of vehicles and how they handle.
You buy that latest argument that you just made, Mr. Pittle, that the more people you pack into an SUV, the more dangerous it is, the more top-heavy it is, the more likely they get killed?
Depends on the vehicle, depends on what the capacity of the vehicle is. Sometimes that may be true, sometimes it's not. What's more important is that we're focusing on rollovers, and it's a very rare event. If you look at the overall fatality rate, the vehicle that has the lowest fatality rate is the largest of the SUV. End of story.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron DeFore, and thank you, David Pittle. Coming up, the political buzz on President Bush.